Hi, I'm David Couch. Welcome to our January edition of our EdTech Leaders Webcast across the state. I'm here in Bergen Independent Schools. Driven by here bunches of times, first time in it, so great to visit with you. This is our opportunity to share what's going on within a district level, but also at the state level and federal level. And during the very beginning, you'll hear some introductions and some overview of the district, but throughout the webcast, and you probably have noticed that from the past two or three, we ask questions to the district versus just at the very beginning and working that in. We ask it actually throughout it. We also ask for y'all's feedback through Go Soapbox. And always as I open these up, sometimes this is the very first time that someone in our district has watched, so I kind of go over to the basics again. But so we have Go Soapbox up. I believe, Andy, the questions are open. I sent those to you earlier this morning, the questions that we're going to ask and the polling questions, and also we have a discussion question. And as always on the discussion question, put your comments there in a constructive way, as if you are live in the audience, and also put your name associated with it, which I always think is a healthy way to give a constructive response. You can still be critical or complimentary in doing that, and we'll go throughout. So we have a couple people here from our office. Damon Jackie, who services all Central Kentucky. We call it Region 5. Dee Dee Connor is up here. We also have some folks here live with Bob Hackworth and Mike Lettingham that'll be hitting on a couple of topics as we go through the top five. But we also have introduced our last webcast, a technique that we're going to use. Is sometimes it doesn't make sense for us to bring all the OET staff. We like them to be in a district and see a district as often as we can to stay in touch with that. But sometimes it just doesn't make sense with the topics we're hitting to bring them all. And sometimes we don't have all the room for them too. So Marty Park and Phil Coleman and Chuck Austin will be joining us remotely. And there's things in the top five, your all's responses that I asked them to give feedback on. So first of all, we'll start with the district, and Superintendent Begley, I know you're from your Kentucky School of the Deaf days, and you've been here the second year?
Second year.
Yep. So I'll let you give an overview of the district and also introduce the folks you have on your team that are here.
All right, thank you, David. First, I'd like to introduce our principal, K-12 principal, Chris Lamons, and our tech guy, bus driver, painter, whatever it might be, Robbie Manning. Just to give you a little background about what Bergen is and where we are, and we're centered in the east side of Mercer County. Mercer County population is about 21,000 people. The school is about 120 years old, so we've got a rich tradition. Bergen is a small school district located right next to beautiful Harrington Lake, south of Shakertown, and to the east of Fort Herod in Harrodsburg. What else? We've got about 515 kids in our school, all in one building. We're one of the 53 independent school districts left in Kentucky. We operate on about a $4 million budget. And until this past December, we had one of the most experienced Board of Educations in Kentucky, with almost 100 years of board experience. We lost two that decided not to run again. We gained two in January, and our board chair and our board chairman have got over 55 years of board experience, so I'm blessed to have them. We are the home of Jack Holman Sr. Our gymnasium is named after him. We've got a road also named after him. 9 years in the ABA and the MBA. We were talking about that earlier. He's got a granddaughter who went to school here for a little while, played basketball here a little while. Jacqueline Coleman, who's also going to be running for lieutenant governor. So we wish her the best. What else would you like to know, David?
Well, you've had actually a student growth.
Student growth?
Well. Yeah.
Last 15 years, we've gone from
375 to 515.
375 to 515. So we are one of those independent districts that there's not a whole lot that grow, but we've been able to maintain and grow with the times.
I also found interesting, I asked you, what's some of the big differences between KSD and and KDE? And you talked about, which our staff will get a good feel for back in Frankfurt, how long it takes to get folks through the whole process, which is a huge difference, which most districts don't realize. All the levels that we do of trying to get someone, and some good folks that we lose sometimes, trying to get them all through that process to where you can go, bam, right here and get them.
Well, working with KDE, there were so many checkoffs.
Yeah.
So many levels, and just here recently with the new bill, went from 30 days to 15 that we have to post a job and we can hire. So that's a big difference.
Yeah. Now you've done some things to where you want to talk about your academy, I think, a little bit that you've put in place here, and also be interested just on your view of. I know you've moved to a one-to-one a little bit, and how you funded that, because the reason we like to share that with districts is because a lot of these folks are on Robbie's role that we have across the state is how did they get it funded, and then what is your plan for sustaining it, just not putting it in place?
Yeah. Well, I'll let Chris talk about how we got the one-to-one. He's got a lot of background with it and kind of can tell you how we got there.
Okay. This is my fifth year being at Bergen. The first, 2 years we had, just kind of real short on how we got this started. We had a computer lab, which was a classroom. As we grew, we became in need of more classroom teachers. We had to take that space, turn it into a classroom. So now we're without a computer lab for our kids to be able to access. We moved some computers into our media center, but the way that we are made up here, we're a K through 12 school. We have elementary specials, middle school specials that are in the library throughout the day. It kind of limited our access to get kids in front of a computer when we needed to be doing assignments on a computer. So one of my big goals was to try to figure out how to get our kids in the high school to have a device in front of them. Thought through some different scenarios. So what we decided on in my third year, this is our third year with the one-to-one devices. The third year we decided we were going to, in order to buy these devices, offer the kids an opportunity to, instead of paying the school fees, which was $99 a year, to purchase a Chromebook through the school. We probably had about 50% of our kids, if not more than that first year that bought the Chromebook. So for them and their parents, it was kind of a good deal in the long run that they're going to spend $250 for a device as opposed to paying $400 over 4 years for school fees, and plus they get to keep these in the end. So that kind of helped get us off the ground with getting devices. We had a little bit of money that we set aside for those kids who weren't buying those Chromebooks for us to purchase enough to outfit the rest of the students. In year 4, we wanted the middle school kids to have devices as well, so we budgeted in to our budget enough money to purchase those devices for our middle school students. So each kid in the middle school has access to having a Chromebook in the classroom. Now, they don't take those home. Middle school does not take those home unless they purchase their own Chromebook. But at least from grade 6 through 12, we now have a device in the hand every day of our students here in the building. And our hope is, in the long term, as we buy more devices, we have devices that will filter on down to our elementary students as well. So that's basically how we've funded that. We're a small district. We have a very limited budget for technology. But there's ways around that. There's ways to do it if that's really what you want to focus on. That's how we approached it.
Now, Robbie, 19 years and playing all these roles, which is common in small school districts. So the bus driver role, did you say you drove a bus today?
Well, I didn't drive it. We deliver the bus to the garage, and I have the bus driver bring it back, or bring him back.
Right. And obviously we'll be going over some of your top 5 feedback, because I found your feedback to be common with the most common trends, and so we'll hit upon that. But we probably will see this dynamic in smaller districts to where you play mainly the technical role, where some of the other responsibilities, or we call the CIO role of maybe keeping up with the data side, and then the communications across different organizations and the money side probably falls more on the superintendent or principal in these roles. And we talk about the people side of education technology and the roles and responsibilities. Not every district has a full-time CIO with all those responsibilities. Sometimes it's divvied out. And I suspect with all the other roles you're playing, especially when you're doing bus bill and everything else that needs to be done here, that shifts some of those other responsibilities to the leadership of the district. And so definitely we have that dynamic here. You guys can talk about those aspects here. One of the things that, one of the things I did want to mention about Jack Coleman, one of the folks that we work with in Frankfurt, Janice Harris, is a big University of Louisville fan. And of course, Jack Coleman was an All-American at University of Louisville. But also your basketball program is pretty good. I speak with my son playing at Woodford County. Always been very competitive. So it really, and that's one of the cool things about basketball itself, is you don't have to be a huge school to have a very competitive team. So I think I heard one of your students is you're going to the All-A tournament today, competing in it.
Well, they played last night, and they won, so they advanced to Thursday's game.
Yeah.
Final four in our region.
Yeah. And then you had one of your clocks, or one of the scoreboards out front, right? From what year is that?
1931.
1931. It shows
Yeah.
what you won. It looks like 22 for Bergen and 11 for your opponent. It just has the opponent down there, which is great.
I think they use that for football and basketball. Right it inside.
And you've been undefeated in football since what,
73?
73, I think.
In 73, you won the 8-man football. Was 8-man or 6-man?
Well, they actually won that in the 50s.
Okay.
But we haven't had football since 73, so technically we've not lost.
Robbie, 19 years, and so I wanted to use this opportunity because we're going to be going through the common trends of the districts. And so yours, and Chuck Austin, that probably puts you first up here, because we saw this across the board, of satisfied with the divestiture from getting the choice of Google email or Microsoft email, right?
Worked out pretty good.
Yeah. And you guys chose...
No, went with Gmail. The teachers were moving to that with all the classroom experience, the power on the Google Classroom, and many other features that are available.
Yeah. So I think that was consistent, as I saw, as a top 10 thing across the state, people liking that choice and how well that choice went. However, and I'll let Chuck Austin talk about this some back, because some of these, they say this is a top 5 thing or top 10 thing across the state. And I would say this is not everything's 100% perfection. And this was an item that did not have 100% perfection, especially after the deployment. And so, Chuck, I'm going to ask you to kind of talk about the legitimate feedback, and we saw a lot of it. Afterward is districts feeling that there probably should have been more assistance to give them a better run and go of the maintaining of that, but also the handling of spam. We saw that a lot of saying, boy, we got a lot more spam. And my question to you all was, why is that? So can you talk to that?
Sure, absolutely, David. Well, first of all, good morning to the audience across the state. Good morning to the folks at Bergen Independent. So, when we talk about the divestiture project, or really the Office 365 upgrade project, I think sometimes it's important for folks to understand why we do what we do. When we broker a service, as in move it to an external partner, we do so very intentionally because oftentimes the partner's in a much better position to deliver that service than we are, especially when you look at the growth expectations across K-12, 24/7 availability, capacity, and specifically when we start talking about, Office 365 and G Suite. Really putting districts in a better place to make choices about not only which parts of the platform they want to turn on and turn off, but which ecosystem they want to predominantly exist in. So that being said, based on that feedback, which was tremendous, by the way, I've had a really, really good conversation with our folks at Microsoft about that, and I wanted them to understand, first of all, our kudos, which we've received in the top 5 for, I'm going to say, the project execution or the implementation. And I think everybody can agree, based on all the complexities and the moving parts that we had, all the preparatory steps, and really all the things that everybody had to do to shoulder that load, that it probably went about as well as anyone could expect. And for that, I applaud our partners from Microsoft as well as Amplified and Google that assisted with that. However, on the back end, okay, post-implementation, that criticism was very well received. And that conversation that I had with Microsoft, they received well. And I say all this because really our expectation was this. When it comes to districts understanding how to manage the new environment, okay, whether it was G Suite, whether it was Office 365, that the partners would step up and step into a position to provide that assistance on how do I do things now that maybe I didn't have to do before because we were offering that as a shared service. And quite honestly, when it comes to user administration, the day-to-day stuff of account management, some of the fundamentals within Office 365, like, for example, how to control spam and phishing. Even though Microsoft had some things they put in place, different webinars, different Skype sessions, at the end of the day, it missed the mark. And they agree that they missed the mark on that, and that is something that we absolutely have to amp up or step up our game in. And when I say we, I'm talking about, KDE as somebody that is working directly with the partner, but applying more accountability and pressure on that partner to deliver what's needed. One more dynamic, though, that we find really, really interesting, and this is a really, really positive thing. As we've talked to districts that migrated over to Gmail, as well as talking with districts that stayed with Office 365 Mail about their experience with spam and really about their overall experience in managing the space, it appears as though I'm going to use the Google community as a term today, are very, very good at what I'm going to call community support. That outside of just relying on Google and Amplify, you see a lot of districts that have banded together to provide some assistance to each other. In other words, when one person finds out a really great option or a new tool, or more importantly, for this conversation, a better way to manage something, they share that and then they help and assist each other. And what we've got to do is we've got to find ways to nurture that same community support within the Microsoft camp. Because we absolutely recognize that it's a change. We recognize that for some districts, it's their responsibility that you're trying to figure out and navigate through. And it's our job to make sure that at the end of the day, you've got the support you need from both your partner, which is Microsoft, as well as us, to make sure that you can be successful in whatever your choice was. So, David, that's kind of my take on it. Any other dialogue you want me to add?
No, that was good. So thank you, and that's something that the good part that we do with this, and I'll talk a little bit more later on about the importance of knowing exactly who said what when we get these responses back, because our intention is these X number of districts that identify this to specifically let Microsoft and whoever know these are the 20 or 30 districts that said this. So it's just not a vague, we hear from districts, and you don't know when someone says districts, it's one district or it's 500 of them. So in this case, we can say not only here's the number, but here's who specifically had this, and Microsoft or whoever vendor that we're talking about, here are the districts you need to get with to address it, or they can get with it together. So I appreciate that. Robbie, the next thing that you mentioned, which was a common top 10 response we get across the state, was the upgrades and the bandwidth worked well.
Oh, yes.
And Phil Coleman, you'll be up next to talk about this. I know because we are the national leader in cloud-based computing in K-12, the national leader when you take a look at K-12 and in government. But also this explosion we see of moving to the one-to-one. Mm-hmm. And also, to be honest with you, with this interest in online testing, which we're going to talk about as well, all those culminate, you better have a network, an internet network that has capacity but is also stable and reliable.
Yep.
And Phil, I'd like for you to talk about, you have some stats that you share once in a while about our internet connectivity for Kentucky K-12.
Sure, David. And we got some really, really good feedback on our feedback report, considering the network. And really the way I guess I'll look at that is that's one of our most important services, because if that network doesn't work, hardly anything works. And so we spend a lot of time and we spend a lot of effort making sure that that's a really, really good service for our school districts. So there's three things that I really look at predominantly, almost not necessarily daily, but surely weekly, and that is growth, availability of the network, and then the security of the network. So I think I've got 3 slides. Andy, if you could throw the first one up there. You get the first one up?
Trending, if you want them trending forward.
So which first slide do you want of his? He's right here in front of me. Which slide?
The growth slide. I thought I gave them to him in that order. The
Okay, I think
bandwidth.
Okay.
trending, yeah.
Okay. All right, Phil, it's up.
Okay. So what this shows is 3 years, and you'll see the peaks, and you'll see the valleys in the summer. So for the last 3 years, you can see that we've had steady growth of our internet usage, and the past 12 months we've had a growth of like 15.5%. We've peaked over 50 gig, and we average about 46 gig, and that's against an 80 gig pipe that we have to the internet. So we continually monitor that, and we not only monitor that for the whole state and for that internet drain, but we also do that for every school district. We have that data, and we continuously look at that. And then the second one is availability. And so you can leave that slide up, Andy. So the availability, and we talked about this before on Webcast, overall it's 99.9%. But when we look at it from an instructional impact, we know what the instructional day looks like, and we've got that data. And so we take the outages and we apply it against that, and we end up with 4.9. We'd like to have 5, 99.999%, but what we end up with at the end of the year is 99.99%. We continue to work on that. We continue to get better. Those numbers get better over time. And remember, we have 2 kinds of outages. We have kind of normal outages where a card quits working or a router quits working or something like that. And then we have, and those generally are things that get better and better. And then we have fiber cuts. A storm takes a tree down, or a car hits a pole, or somebody digs up a piece of fiber. Those tend to take a lot longer. We have that data too against each one of those kinds of outages. And then the third one is security. So Andy, if you'll throw up the next slide, which is talking about our DDoS service.
He's trying to make sure you get the right order here.
You have 2 of them
the
have
big yellow
DDoS.
one.
One says insights and one says graphic.
Which one you want? 2 have DDoS. One says insights and one says
One's a
graphic.
graph and one's a...
One's a graph.
It's the big one. I'm not sure what they say.
Just put up one. He'll talk about it.
Okay.
He'll figure it out.
Okay. So there's what we really have is over the past 12 months we've had 105 DDoS attacks in 2018, and that's against 31 separate district targets. Now that's interesting to me because we've got a lot of school districts that have been multiple targets over the year, and not just over the year, but the past, let's say, 5 years. We have continuously, it's the same districts kind of over and over. So we have those repeated targets. So we're trying to take a look at that and say, why are these particular school districts being the target? So the largest DDoS attack we had this year was 118 gigs, and that's a pretty big attack. That's 1.5 times bigger than our total internet capacity. So why is that important? Because if you think about if we weren't able to mitigate that DDoS attack, that wouldn't just affect that one school district that the attack was against, but it would affect every school district because it would basically make our internet for every school district unusable. So the DDoS stuff is really, really important. We have, if we hadn't done the mitigation, we would have had, I think, 50 hours of outages. And because we did the mitigation, we have just under 7. So the next chart, Andy, is the one that shows by month. And really what I want to say about that one is you can see it happens every year in September or August. the DDoS attacks go way up in the fall, and in the summer between, let's say, April and July, they're almost nothing. So and you can see that on the chart. So we really think that these DDoS attacks are probably either done by students or maybe even former students. We're always trying to figure that out, but it just looks like the start of school is every year. In the trend, if you match those up against the last 5 years, it looks exactly the same.
So let me hit up on that a little bit, Phil, when he says students, it's a service you can pay for. And so, what we think some of it's not 100%. At the beginning of school, there may be a test that's happening or something, and so there is an attempt, they pay for the service that caused disruption, but obviously no disruption happens or doesn't happen in state of base, so they go, why am I paying for this when there's not really what I thought was going to happen? Now, that's not encouraging everyone to do that, just one aspect, but this happens again and again at this type of year. And so we're trying to figure out who it may be or not, but that's part of it. And it's important for us to talk about the success we've had with it. We also had an issue with Infinite Campus with their DDoS attack in Minnesota. And by moving to the cloud, it's really shifted the attacks coming on the Kentucky K-12 network. But obviously, Infinite Campus has to address this. And Jefferson County was impacted by their parents in particular with the parent portal. But once again, anything that impacts, a district like Jefferson County has a possibility of impacting others, and even, to be honest with you, impacts Bergen, has a possibility of impacting others. You don't say something?
Well, I was going to kind of tag off of something that Phil had brought up, and what you had mentioned about one of Robbie's what went well in 2018 about the Ken bandwidth upgrades. And I don't think it's unique to Bergen, although sometimes smaller districts can kind of feel this impact more, but it has to do with budgets and, trying to figure out, I think, Superintendent Begley, you said you've got about a $4 million a year budget. Chris, you had mentioned some unique ways that you had worked with students over the past 4 or 5 years on being able to get towards a one-to-one. And, we can have that 4 nines, or as Phil said, we'd like to have that 5 nines of Ken bandwidth uptime. But that's just one part of the puzzle to make sure that we have opportunities to change the learning experience of our kids. The other piece is within the building. And I went back and looked at some budgeting, some financial pieces about Bergen, and I roughly, for this first 5-year period of the new E-rate approach, that $150 per enrolled student, I think you all had about $75,000, give or take, roughly, if you do the math with 500 students. But you were saying earlier, Robbie, we're finishing year 4, and you're down to how many total dollars left of E-rate funding?
$700, $900. So yeah, we used it up in 3 years.
So if you do the quick and dirty math on that, you've used about 99 cents of every dollar that was available through that Category 2 funding in 4 years. And I know there are a lot of districts across the state that maybe are in similar boats. Some of them still have some funds to use in this last year, but I think that goes to talk about Bergen's story of you wanted students to have accessibility, Chromebooks, have it in their hands. They don't have to go to a classroom or a lab. Yours was kind of a little bit different because you needed the space. But you've also had to make sure that the building itself was healthy enough that those students had a good experience. What about going forward, though? Are you starting to have some conversations about possibly that next 5-year cycle, which hopefully, knock on wood, federal government's going to fund again in a similar manner?
Yeah, we're still looking at Wi-Fi bandwidth. We're still upgrading. We're probably in the 400 range of iPads, computers, MacBooks. I think we've gone from like 100, 150 18 years ago. So, all this stuff has been important and been good to us that you're all monitoring from the state level. And so providing that allows us to work with the workstation level and just to be working and improving those things. So yeah, keeping our bandwidth available for future use, because it's going Wi-Fi primarily, and a lot of people are using it. MacBooks and Chromebooks. It's just essential.
Well, I think that goes also to the point of, again, small budgets, small districts, trying to take advantage of every funding source you've got. I always look at it as any time we can go after EdTech at 20 cents on the dollar. I'm not sure what your exact discount rate is, but whenever you can go after something for 20 cents on the dollar, and that's $75,000 worth of equipment, roughly $15,000 worth of local expense is what it ended up costing you. And probably without that, you wouldn't have been able to have that solid infrastructure within the building.
I want to hit on a topic that you didn't list on your top 5, but we talked about a little bit earlier, that I see across the state, and also we see it's important to the legislature session this to start it is Senate Bill 1 about school safety. And I could see it from your comments of, and we saw, it's not 100%, this is not 100% one was saying, it's, especially with the munis codes, do we, even though it's not part of the master plan budget, do we add a commodity code to track things that are not related necessarily to the instructional side, administrative side, but the security side? And specifically, things like security cameras is what I saw come up a lot. And the whole element of security. And Bob, that there's lots of high fives to you and your efforts and other people's efforts across the state about putting this on the radar screen. But as I drove up to your front parking lot, I always wanted to call Damon to make sure I was at the exact right spot I need to be, and I got no service. You're not that far from some big areas here. And so I know, as we talked a little bit earlier, you have wired phones in the classroom, but there is a desire to add to that toolkit to have cell phone service. So I say, is it limited to one provider? It's not, because some places I travel in the state, the service provider I have doesn't work, but there's another one. But it appears none of them work from here, which is, from your perspective, a safety issue. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you like to be addressed? Words of wisdom to us on that?
We were talking earlier, my biggest concern is that safety issue. It's not so much the instructional piece of having cell phones as tools in the classroom. It's the safety issue. Right now, I have an M cell through AT&T in my office, which will outfit around 10 phones, I guess, that a few of us can call out on. However, if you're not on that M cell, there's no cell phone reception here in Bergen, pretty much from probably 2 or 3 miles going towards Harrisburg all the way to North Point and Danville. What concerns me, again, is that safety piece. If something was to happen here and we don't have means of communicating an emergency out to the police department. We're a small town. We have one police officer, too, and they're not always on duty. They work certain hours, and we're not always aware of when they're here. So one of the things, getting a hold of law enforcement, if we needed somebody here, it's going to be 10 minutes probably to get them here. So, we've talked to the mayor of Bergen to see what kind of help they can provide. I think it's been mentioned to the judge executive here. But, if we could somehow, we would even offer up a space on top of our roof for a tower to help in that sense. But that is one of the issues, and I don't know where we go
So, obviously,
to get help with that.
What we can do in our capacity, obviously, we will talk with the providers that we know about it. But one of the reasons I did want to mention this context, it's very important statewide and nationwide at this time, anything related to school safety. Obviously, for those not familiar with the legislative process, and we have those that don't, anything that makes House Bill 1 or Senate Bill 1, when it's Senate Bill 1, it says the Senate feels that is the most important topic we could cover. In fact, I think I heard the Senate President said he wished it could be called General Assembly Bill 1, where it was the most important things even to the House, and the House makes it a priority too. So we're going to see things throughout this session, I suspect the next one, around school safety. So anything that's around that's important to us. Bob, I know you gave us some good Go Soapbox questions. This is a reminder that we have Go Soapbox out there. We have a discussion question we'd like you to respond to about what are the best topics that we should cover in the upcoming CIO Summit, which a lot of people said, boy, that was a really good thing. The feedback gives us a good feel for that. But I would like to see, and Andy and Megan, the Go Soapbox questions, we'll just go right in the order to keep it simple on you all. And you guys can answer this quickly, up or down. Is your district planning any large purchases of school safety, security equipment, video cameras, metal detectors, sector within the next year? So this is what it is, the responses that have put in so far. So you can see that. And we have a not sure. How about you all? If you had a 1, 2, or 3, which one would you have answered there?
Well, we just purchased several cameras to outfit the entire building.
Yeah.
We've added more cameras. I'm not sure of the number, but Robbie can tell you that number, but we've added.
And this goes to the point about the people side of education technology. What we're finding besides, Robbie, the roles that you've been keeping up with for 19 years, this area of security has, and it should, included the technical staff.
Yes.
And I know you've increased your staff by 5 or 10 people just for the security aspect, right?
Yeah.
Which is
These are one.
right. That's right. So part of this is the reason we talk about the people side is just an awareness for superintendents and other folks across the state. And this is a long view of the people side that we talk about the importance of these types of positions and roles. We've had some great success in this year. But there's X number of districts, I've seen nothing, and that's probably true. If nothing else, we want to make sure the superintendents and board show some love for your position, even though you don't get 10 more people or a $50,000 raise. There's some awareness of the hours you're taking and putting in to keep this up and reliable, then adding on the security aspect of it. And like I say, this is a long haul thing. As most folks know, I've traveled to most of the cooperative meetings, and to be honest with you, probably 50 or 60% of the superintendents show up at those meetings. Now, as you know, you're live day to day. There's some you can attend at a co-op, there's some you can't. And so what is our approach? And I've also presented to the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents and many other groups, but it still may be we have 40, 50% of the superintendents that haven't heard one thing we've said. And so the words of wisdom from you all to us is what can we do to get this better on the radar screen of superintendents and boards? Now, some of that is, and we always offer to have a staff member come and meet with your superintendent board. We can write something as well, and I saw that from one of the comments, start sending things straight to the superintendent. In some cases, the superintendent is the CIO and the principal, so overall, so it makes sense that I sent to them, but they may not be attending some of these other meetings that we're at. So I just use that as a teaching point in this setting. Don't get too upset that you've not seen something immediately. This is an approach for the long haul that we're just trying to get on the radar screen. We are seeing differences made, and people said it in their comments from other districts. It did make a difference on getting additional staff, but also just people recognizing if it wasn't additional staff and pay, the heroic things are doing well. And just adding on, and you have other areas here, being a small district, people take on different roles, so this is not unique. But just sometimes a recognition, the technical staff tend to be not fuss about much, and they just keep on doing it and pile it on, stay here till forever late at night and weekends and all that to make it work, and people don't recognize all behind the scenes, and it's adding this on. I don't have to say anything you don't know, but it has been a great educational effort. The groups I've presented to, for the most of the superintendents and board members say, I just didn't know. And then there is appreciation for the folks they have there, because I tell them, you got some A players there. If that A player leaves, you may have difficulty getting someone at these pay scales to take those places. So you better give them a high five or a hug. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate everything Robbie does as much as him having that CDL license as well. If you've seen the bus driver shortage in Kentucky, it's awesome. It's awful. But one thing we did to help Robbie this year is we reorganized our librarian position. Mm-hmm. It's part-time librarian, part-time TRT.
Yes.
So that's taken a little bit off Robbie and Chris as well, because Chris was because I walk in, he's handing out all those Chromebooks, and now she's kind of taking that over, and she's a resource for our teachers. So
Yeah.
that's really helpful.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because that is definitely one of the techniques we talk about is expanding the role of the library media specialist, and a lot of them are anxious to do that and do that well. But I think that's without adding a new position. You've kind of taken someone and added some responsibilities to them, but probably responsibilities that they needed to do anyway.
Right.
Yeah, right. The next one up, and this was from a question that we got that Bob put out that we got this week from an Eastern Kentucky district. It's about seeing the influx of voice assistants, Amazon, Alexa, and Google Home in your classroom. Have you all seen those here yet? No, I didn't think so. So what happened, if you read the story, and Bob, this was how long ago was it?
This is a few
Can you hear
months.
him all right by talking there? He can't.
No.
Yeah, so. Well, where can you hear him at?
What's closer to the screen?
Yeah, just step over here, Bob.
Yeah, about a year ago, within the past year, a couple were having a private conversation in their home, and the Amazon Alexa device picked up from their conversation, record this conversation, and send it to a friend of yours from the contact list. And so that's exactly what happened. The Amazon Alexa heard all the right words, and then this random person from their contact list, Megan and Andy are laughing, so there's something strange going on. Anyway, the Amazon Alexa sent this conversation to a friend of theirs from a contact list.
Four or five Bobs there.
One Bob's too much sometimes.
And they got a call from this random person in their contact list saying that they'd been hacked, when in fact the Amazon Alexa was apparently doing the right thing and doing what it had been asked to do. They just didn't understand that they had asked it to do that.
Yeah.
There are some other issues in schools and stuff where if someone brings in an Amazon Alexa or a Google Home that has their own account, that you can actually buy things using Alexa and Google Home, and students who might be using that in the classroom may figure out a way to take advantage of that and get other information, as well as student information being uploaded into the cloud that Google and Amazon may not want, because it might be information from students who are under 13 years old, may not have given consent, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there are some significant privacy.
And I think you did a good job. Thank you, Bob. Where a lot of Christmas gifts showing up now in the schools is some of this. So just a heads up that you may have these popping up. And I didn't really, when I saw it, I said, well, there's not that many of those. I was even surprised this number being as high as it is. So
Yeah, me too.
that's going to. It's like, I like it, popping up like daisies. Keep that in mind. Let's go to number 3. This has to do a little bit with, and it probably been appropriate for when Chuck was speaking about when you migrated to the G Suite for email. Did you perceive more or less about spamming? Robbie, I don't know how if you had answered this one, had a little clicker, how would you answer this one?
Didn't perceive anything different.
Okay. Yeah, about the same. So you would answer that. So definitely there's a difference between this and the Microsoft side. And I think it has to go with what Chuck did, and that's why I asked him. There are groups of districts getting together to figure this out, and they're sharing. And on the Microsoft side, they are not. And some of that is we need Microsoft to give some better guidance and training, but also probably some of those districts that are Microsoft working closer together to share some tricks of the trade to help out. The last one is, and been wanting to ask this for a while, but I know Bob is, does your district pay for cyber insurance? Do you all pay for cyber insurance? Okay. So let's see how, if you're aware of that across the state, number 4. And once again, that's higher than I thought it would be, just in that. So we'd ask you as we go through the Go Soapbox, even if you didn't answer here, keep on through the webcast. Come back to that, because we always take a look at that at the end of the webcast and talk about them afterward, about these topics. So thank you for sharing that. Robbie, one of the other things that you shared in your feedback, and this was consistent across the state, and this was about your appreciative of our help desk staff, our field staff, and appreciative of our E-rate services was Scott and Ann. We also saw a lot of that with the MADS team. Anything that is customer-facing with our service, for across the board, is we got positive district feedback, which is important for us. It's not 100% perfect, and I would say with all these we've identified, and usually I get this at the beginning, we are far from 100% perfect. So when I said things that go well, don't say, but we had this thing and this thing and this thing. Truth. We are far from 100% perfection and definitely will never achieve that. But we definitely want to recognize things that overall seem to be going fairly well. And this is a high five to our team, our customer-facing team. You were getting ready to say something?
Well, I was going to say, I looked over here. Dee Dee was sharing some of the comments on Go Soapbox. So Superintendent Begley and Chris, I mean, you all are not alone, it looks like, whenever it comes to disappointed in cell phone coverage. There's a few other districts that are also commenting, finally, someone else saying, the same thing. And, while it's the security piece, I know is a primary concern for you, and it is for every district, we've also got students that if the student is at home, they may not have access to cable modem, DSL, whatever the case may be. But I think you said probably about 99% of your high school kids probably have a smartphone that have some ability to do it as a hotspot. So even those students, if they go home with that Chromebook, they're not able, some of them are probably not able to have access to the internet simply because the cell phone won't even get a signal.
Right.
I think one of the questions, though, that didn't, one of the comments was brought up here was the fact that some of them are working around it with the Wi-Fi calling. And that's the only way I can get a hold of my daughter when she lives out on a farm in southern Jessamine County, and that's the only way I can get her is the Wi-Fi. So I think that was one of the recommendations.
Well, and the M-Cell, like what you had also mentioned, but again, that's a limited number of staff within the district.
And they don't make those anymore.
That's right, yeah.
We tried to get a couple more, and they couldn't make them. So thanks, AT&T.
And there's some others in that category that could help out with this. So we'll be talking with them. But one that you need to improve for sure. So let's talk about the top 5 in general. For someone in this role at the state level, is when you have 173 districts and all the schools that we have and responsibilities, when you hear someone complaining, you can't tell if it's 1% broke or 99% broke. And I think it's important, and I always try to say, is it 99% broke for 99% or 1% broke for 1%? And not that you ignore that 1%. But anyone that's dealt with me at a staff meeting is I always say what percentage of this is broke and what percentage of this is working, because the impression that you just get from folks, if you don't talk about the things that are working, they're assuming it's 99% broke. And also the things that are broke can dominate 99% of a conversation. So I always say we will acknowledge this 1%, we'll circle back to it. But what things are we truly somewhat doing 99% well, not 100% perfection, and what things are we doing 1% well? That need to be addressed, or 99% broke, that going the same. I'll just give you a co-op example. Sometimes I'll be at a co-op meeting with superintendents. A superintendent will fuss about something. You would get the impression that all superintendents felt like that. But in essence, when I say, how many other agree with what they just said, and no one else raises their hand. So if you didn't ask that question, you would think, just because no one else said anything, that it's 99% broke or 100% broke. So that circles me back to how we do this survey for both our OAT staff that we do for all districts and we do for all KD program areas. We want 100% feedback. And so this particular technique of saying, district, put your name behind it, and we want 100% participation, does a lot of positive things for us, besides just an anonymous. I'll talk about the plus and minus of an anonymous. It tells us specifically who the district is when there's a problem. When you have a pure anonymous and someone says, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, going back to my analogy is you don't know specifically from their perspective why it's working or not working. It may be working for 99%, but you don't know why this person from their perspective says it's not working. And you don't have the opportunity to circle back to them without them putting a name to it. I'm also a big believer that if you have something critical to say, you should be able to do it constructively with your name behind it. There is a reason that online newspapers have removed the ability to anonymously post stuff, because people tend to be vicious, non-constructive with it, and you can't really tell if it's 10 people acting as one. And so online now requires, whenever you do, and this same thing in paper form, you put your name behind it, which I think is an important thing. Topics, it's wonderful that that thing has gone offline. That was poisonous to most communities. People being, post things anonymously and just really scathing, ugly things that many times were not true, but definitely could have be said in a more constructive way. And I would say, I think it forces you to take a look at different perspectives. And in our OET staff meeting, I complimented one of our staff members. He was critical about something, but I could tell without that being anonymous, he would just gone probably straight blunt. I wanted to be candid. But then he said, well, maybe this is from my perspective. And he gave the perspective of why that may not be working as well from his perspective, which makes sense for us to do. So anonymous do work in certain situations. For example, Go Soapbox, we have a poll question. I'm not asking what specific districts think that. It gives you quick feedback. We do the same thing in the department. There is an anonymous survey that we send out across the state that I went over with our staff, some of the feedback and 36 different questions. With those type of surveys, you typically get 30 to 40% back. Maybe you get 50% back. But once again, you're missing your other 50% you have to interpolate. I can tell you the type of survey that we send you all, where you have to actually write something, if that were purely 100% anonymous, we would probably get 5 or 10% returns, because when someone has to write versus just doing a checkbox, the tendency for them to complete it all, especially there's a tendency with any feedback box to just really focus on something that is broke. And it's one specific topic. So you don't get the holistic view of an organization and what's going on. And so that's the technique that we use for this. Like I say, we got other things we get, quick feedback and anonymous. But this one it has all the pluses that's associated with really understanding the true statewide perspective. And so even as I go over some of these common trends, you can get a feel for, well, how do I fit in with that? And even you can be a one-off, and that's okay. But we have to understand why, from your perspective, did you say something that was not consistent with the rest of the state. And some of the times it is a legitimate thing for us to take a look at. But also it helps me understand, is something 99% broke for 99% or 1% broke for 1%. And it helps us keep on doing the things well that we need to keep on doing and circle back to that other 1%. I would say this and to you, if there's something that you really want to state and you want to state anonymously, typically there's another method to do that. And there's another reason to do it. Maybe go through your personnel system to do those. But also, if there's something that you want to be candid and blunt about, go ahead and put it in a written letter. Maybe go to the county next year's and send it so we don't know what it is. But there's always a method for you to send anonymously, and you can send them to me that way too. But typically, those are one thing, and you can be as candid as you want in those. But typically, or you can say a friend, they have a friend for you. So I'm asking for a friend. And have a friend ask for you if you want to do that. But I have never, if I had to do something in my lifetime, be critical of someone, I always put my name behind it. And I think it's just a good lifelong skill set to develop. And while there's plus sides of anonymous of getting quick feedback, you just want to make sure you're going in the right direction. So I just want to explain to why we go through the 100% response rate from all school districts and giving it their best shot. So let's talk about overall from a state quickly, and I've hit on some of those that you all hit. That's what's gone well. We've hit upon a lot of different groups. One of the things that kept was really high was the KETS offer of assistance. I would say that was mentioned somewhere on 90% of all the feedback I got from districts across the state about the importance of keeping that what it is or making it even higher. And we even talked about this a little bit earlier. We would love to make the KETS offer assistance higher, but there is going to be a lot of heavy lifting by districts required to help us do that. That means folks like your position and your position going and talking to your legislator and your board saying this is important. Without districts doing that, if there is only one point they hear in Frankfurt for that, our probability of getting that raise is 0.00. I can just tell you. And so we will give it our best at bat. We're all supportive of doing that, and our staff knows anything that we do at the OET level, especially at the senior leadership level, is so sensitive about the Office of Assistance. Is there anything that we're doing that could take away 1 penny away from an Office of Assistance districts, given how important it is? So that's well stated, the importance of that, and we'll keep on making that up on the radar screen. I'd also say with what Phil said, the importance of the network. You saw that. In 2020, our top priority will be the funding for the high-speed network to increase it, because all these stats that Phil is showing you, we'll use those and a lot more to show we're just not talking about we're needing it. There's real things that are happening that are causing the demand in the bandwidth to be used, and so you will use those stats that you've developed. STLP program was also commonly listed across the districts. Overall, the district firewall updates and upgrade was overall listed as a thumbs up by a very high percentage of school districts. It's got a little minus associated with it. As AT&T is aware of, there is a specific model of the firewall that is not performing well, and it has failure. And also and I know AT&T watches these, so I'm speaking to them as well. The replacement of those when they fail must be much better. And so those are the two aspects that we saw. Overall, a positive move of moving that to a cloud-based service, and the service being overall very good. But that's, once again, without 100% perfection.
And David, just to speak to that, in a recent conversation with
Can you hear him okay?
I'm sure y'all can probably hear me.
I know you don't have to have 100% perfection. Can you hear him okay?
Let's see. Go ahead and keep
So, just in a recent conversation with AT&T, they specifically addressed their issue with a particular model of the firewall and are taking some pretty specific drastic actions to fix that.
Okay.
So they very much so acknowledge that and are working to fix that in the interim as well as the long term. So we feel pretty confident they are appropriately addressing that.
And I know we met with their senior leadership. We mentioned that we only have 2 or 3 things that we mentioned to them for, so good to hear. That's a good update. Our communications with the districts, so through these webcasts, through newsletters that we do, through the CIO Summit, through our field staff, through a lot of different meetings that you have, the regional meetings that we have, is a double thumbs up. Once again, not 100% perfection. When we asked our districts, our OET staff, of their perception, and we always want to make sure these perceptions match up, 84% of our own staff said Katie communicates very effectively with schools and districts. That's primarily what we do with OET. That was the highest of any office in KDE. Now, once again, with this anonymous feedback, I only know what 50% of the staff said, and they clicked it off. 13% of our staff said somewhat good, and 3% said not good at all, or not good. And so the part I have is what 3% were those, and why do they have that perspective? Can we make some things better? So that's always a struggle with these anonymous surveys. So it's good to have that back. We want to make sure districts feel the same way. And so this matches up. We think we're doing effective job communication. Some could say we're over-communicating. I would much be rather guilty of over-communicating than under-communicating, which most have that issue. I mentioned a lot of the other teams. I think I mentioned the SMADS team or the MADS team. Did I mention them yet? Being a thumbs up from them. The networking team, digital learning team as well. Folks really saw the difference that made. In fact, what's interesting, a lot of superintendents and principals know that team by name. In all my 25 plus years, I don't know if I've traveled for talking with superintendents and principals and from different areas of the state and then knowing our staff member's name, especially doing a team effort like that. So that tells me that's a really positive thing. The CIO Summit, once again, got positive timing. We're the only state that does that. There's no other state that has webcasts like this for their districts monthly. There is no other state that has a CIO Summit with their EdTech leaders. There's no other state that has field staff like Damon. And there's no other, they don't do it. So the assumption that, well, everybody's doing that, nobody's doing that. But we want to make sure we have the topics right. And so I'm hoping we're getting some feedback of people looking at this, and maybe there's none. And the best we do, to be honest with you, if we don't get feedback even like through this mechanism, we take a look at what you gave in the top 5, things that we done well, can get better and goals, and we pick from that. And then after that, we say, we think these are the top 3 to 5, and we put them out there. We get any feedback on it? So none. Okay, so I'm telling you, if we don't get something from that, then we will go and we will select and do our best with that. But this is your opportunity to say, I think of the things you're discussing. I want to see this. I think it's great value, just not to my district, but maybe 80-90% of the districts across the state for us to discuss this topic. Most of you felt that we had marketed and made a difference this year in marketing our achievements in the Kentucky K-12 education technology. As I've told most folks, my greatest sadness of this role for 25 years is such a high percentage of our students and our teachers and our community not knowing we have the best education technology system in America. And we've done so many firsts. In 25, we've put out our 25-year timeline of so many things that Kentucky K-12 is the first in the nation to do it, the largest to do it, and is still in most cases the only one to do it. So I am finally seeing some ground moved of people realizing we have all of our schools connected. You say, why does he keep on saying it? Because 95% of our population doesn't know. All of our schools are already connected to a high-quality internet service. And when you have a high population that think 95% don't, they must think we don't have any of them connected or we're the worst in the nation. And so that's why you see this over and over again when such a high percentage of the population does not know. And so that's the reason we mentioned it. We did see some improvement. I heard some people saying at different levels, gee, we have all of our schools connected. But there's a lot of other things that we're doing that are doing that. But we've had some, we've made some ground with that, but we'll continue to do that. Talked about Ken already. The other thing that came up a lot, and this is the plus side of you putting your name to it, is Lightspeed. Now, there's a tendency with any kind of feedback for folks, especially a specific service not going, if it goes going off from the perspective, not saying something. And so that's always why it's important to say, is it 99% broke, is it 70% broke, and feeling it. The part from Lightspeed is mixed, to where the service, but also the reporting, and Robbie, I talked to you a little bit earlier about it being adequate, but it could be better. My concern always in this field of internet content management system, is there anything that's going to be 100% perfect? Or no matter what you get, is it always going to have this from X percentage of what you have? But the reporting this year in particular, and Chuck and Phil, I don't know if you want to jump in, and feel free for any of our staff to jump in of something that I've mentioned that I passed over. But the part with Lightspeed, most people like that we went to the cloud-based configuration backups, so they like that. But the reporting feature, they thought had a lot to go, and I would agree with that too. And Lightspeed's heard that. So the plus side of this, now that the districts put their name behind that, is we will take those X number of districts, we will present that to Lightspeed. And so they know these X number of districts are the ones you need to speak with, and we may just even have a special webcast that those districts and others obviously can join in, that talk about what specifically, versus just a general comment, do you like and not like about that service that we have going forward. So those are the things that we've done well that was consistent across the board. Other minor things?
David, if you don't mind, I mean, something you said there made me think of something. This concept of 95% of the Commonwealth doesn't know of the successes we've had in CATS. And, maybe looking to Chris or Superintendent Begley, are there conversations that happen out in the community with other community leaders where you find out that they're surprised by the level of EdTech, the level of connectivity, the successes that you all have here in Bergen, or are there some things maybe that you all can give insight to on how we can do better communicating this story that we've got as a state?
I've not been in conversations like that. I mean,
No, I'm not either. I mean, we talked to community and partners, the Corning grant that we got this past year to help out with some things technology-wise, but we really haven't had those conversations.
I think what happens, and I would say this, is the local district may know they're connected. There's a good number that don't. Mm-hmm. But I think the big issue, they're saying, well, we're connected, but 95% of the rest of the state must not be. It is a serious problem that we deal with over and over again. So there's part of this just awareness, because you can build something and put something in complete duplication of something that already exists that's doing well. So part of that is making sure people understand it. The minor things that you all mentioned in common, The technology-enabled project management that we do, the KETS master plan, by the way, that was a big thing to us at the state level, to put that in place, a 6-year plan. The new KETS building wiring checklist, a change of the commodity codes and the TAR. We did simplify that greatly, but it says, can we track some of the other areas I mentioned earlier? The Munis disaster recovery effort was mentioned as a thumbs up. Also, there was X number that says, can we not do something better? And I'll talk to my finance officer. Can we do something where finance officers are doing a better job telling the technology staff of things going on? And that didn't happen a lot, but it did happen. The collaboration that our office has with the KISTI team, the digital readiness report, seeing the added value of being able to do district-to-district comparisons and district to state-to-district, the EPO rollout, the WSUS, the Cisco VPN, the IT certification licenses, and Laura Rognes leads that for us, but we're going to talk about how we're going to expand that. The KISTI Fall CIO Summit, the virtual summit. The KETS offers an email form versus on paper, and the new eScrap contract. So let's talk about the things that need improvement. We didn't get to, but we should have. The self-service passwords. And these are going to be goals, not things that didn't go well, but goals for the next year that you all mentioned in common. The SHI Microsoft A3 licensing came up pretty common. The stale accounts that we have in districts, and dealing with the 1% issue of we have 1% subs. We want to keep that account there. They come and go during the year. Mine is a 99% broke issue, not a 1%, where you've had people gone for years and they should be gone. And that the real security risk associated with it. So I know there's some 1% on this and we don't ignore them. That X number you have these teachers that rotate coming and going, that's a 1% of the total problem. But we need to recognize what that 1% is, so I appreciate you telling me that. The virus protection approach that we take across the state with McAfee. I like what one district says, should I stay or should I go? What song is that? I don't want to get us in trouble with YouTube where they take us off me just saying the word as a song. Be careful with that. I've done that. But it is a really, you can see, I don't know, I want to say it's a 50-50 split. It's always tougher when it's 50-50, but this view of, well, let's get out of this is the basic virus protection that comes with the computer good enough and the management with it, especially if you go to Windows 10, and we can get out of that. But also the smaller districts, particularly like you all, this is just another role that I have to respond to. And we have done at the state level a fantastic added value service for districts in this category. So that's the balance we have. There is no easy thing. We're still in the concept phase with it. And I suspect that's going to be, unless I hear otherwise, one of our CIO Summit topics going forward. Lots of pluses for the CIO Learning Academy, KISTI, by the way. The CIO certification, they really like that going forward. We've also, the phishing and spam, we've mentioned that a lot. Cybersecurity got double thumbs up, single sign-on. An increase in the funding, we've talked about that. And updated state contracts, and we talked about that internally with the voice contracts in particular. VoIP through Ken, and my understanding, talking with Phil, there is a way to do that. And Phil jump in and tells me, I see that blank chair there, Phil, if there's a way to do that in a 30-second thing that we want to tell districts to be aware of. We're understanding the printers. You got 15 or 30 seconds, Phil, to talk about that. So you can just quickly say it can be done or not. So go ahead.
Yes, we can work with local providers to do voice and put that on the Ken network. We're working with several right now, including a couple of large school districts.
Right. An upgrade, obviously, of one of the Ken components, the switch across the state that's reached a certain age. This was related to the security, Bob, and this came up as a very common one. Staff provisioning solutions, and particularly how can we use IC and Munis. And this is not a state thou shalt, so I want to say it again. This is not a state, I'll say it one more time. This is not a state thou shalt. This is an added value service that we perhaps could do at the state level for X number of districts that help you keep up better with people coming and going. And I would say, from our perspective, K-12 districts across the state with their data systems maybe get a C, D, or even F letter grade of keeping up when someone leaves, all the data systems that they have and rights they have access to, changing those. And even if they change roles within a district, they may have had a need to know something. Now in this new role they do not know. And so I do think, and a big added value I think we can do for X number of school districts is learn what some districts have already done and maybe share that and just give it to them, or create something that can be shared, because it definitely helps us deal with the security end of things. On the school report card, we're going to talk, Dee Dee's going to talk about in just a few minutes the overall. But the tech portions of the school report card we released was a common complaint. I suspect going forward, there'll be very little that we gather in the school report card through Bright Bites. The only thing that will be required, will be gathered in the Bright Bites portion of it, will be that is mandated by law that collected by the school level. As you know, what we do right now, we collect the district level data, and that's fine. But at the federal level, they want to go down to the school level for certain things, and that's the only things that we'll collect going forward. A continued discussion of hosted cloud services. And Mike, we've talked about this. We're having this talk internal, some state standards for food service systems. I don't know if that interests you guys or not, but definitely there's districts that have an interest in that. The individual learning plan, the EDS, Education Development Suite, Instructional Management System cuts with no replacement. And I think this goes in the category, it doesn't matter till it matters. I think we were pretty good throughout the year saying this thing's getting ready to be cut. And at the KD agencies level, we've done a pretty good job of diversifying funds for different things. So we tried to get the other program areas to spend money on technology-enabled projects. When their budget is zeroed out, that initiative is zeroed out. So another office's budget paid for the individual learning plan, Education Development Suite, and ILP. In the previous legislative session, the funding source that funded that went to 0.00. And so when it goes 0.00, there is no other big stash. We go, oh, by the way, we'll just take it from that. So the reason it became on the radar screen of district staff is because those went away. I'm sure the superintendent said, oh, by the way, district technician, create something for me. So before it wasn't on your radar screen, now it's on the radar screen. Or go find something for me to do that role. But these are things at the state level, when things keep on being zeroed out as a funding source, they go away. And we haven't gone the other way in quite some time, but that should not have been too much of a surprise that we announced it. But once again, it may not have mattered until it totally disappeared off the radar screen. Online testing was a big success for us last year for end of course. There's going to be online testing. I talked with Rhonda Sims, who leads our assessment accountability at state level. That's going to be a big effort for, I think it's 2 subject areas for the high schools this fall. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think one of the best ways to get increases in the technology funding for K-12 is related to online testing. I've seen the state of Virginia do it many years ago. They're the only state that I know has done that, but it has worked. And so online testing, the use of all these devices instructionally, the move to more one-to-one is going to continue to be a big part of what our toolbox is going forward. Phil, I talked to you about this one. KIH3 related staff just showing up at a district and the district not knowing that they were going to show up. And so I know AT&T is watching that, so there was X number that did that. And Phil, I don't know if you've had that conversation with them about that.
Yes, we have, David, and we're working with AT&T to do the collaboration and the correlation of events. And since we've moved to the firewall service, managed firewall service, and then we have the transport service, which is the actual network, you know, we're working with AT&T to make sure that they put in all the pieces necessary to make that correlation, not only to report outages and things like that, but also when we have people going out and going to school districts to do work, for upgrades and those kinds of things. So that's a continued effort that we're working with AT&T on.
The part that I saw that you all mentioned this maybe a year ago, at the national level, we have the ability to see what other states are buying statewide services. So for example, I can see the other states have this information system and exactly what states have that. And I can see what their initial ongoing costs are at the state level. Now, I'll be the first one to say, I am the person that spearheaded that. And I'm the person that spearheaded it being started and populated and maintained. So it takes someone like that for these systems. So the reason I mention that in this context is I saw a lot of you mention they would love to know what other districts are doing. You know, Chuck mentioned how you all can help each other in the training, but what do you all have that we don't track at the state level? Obviously, you know, we have Infinite Campus and Munis and other ones, but there are products that you buy that you would love to know what you all use, how much do you pay initially and ongoing. And I would just say, well, I'm not saying how it's done or Katie does it or what organization. I see added value in that. But I can tell you, it will take one of you districts, like I am at the state level. I am the person that is every meeting we have saying where we at with that and we keeping it updated. And I'm the person that's saying go out and meet with the other 49 states and gather that data. It takes that to initiate it and sustain it. So I see an added value in that service for you all. And I really do see some need of someone to help facilitate that for you. And that doesn't have to be KD. You know, obviously at the national level, that's not the DOE at the national level. That's an organization called the Chief State School Officers, and we do it through that method. And that's a role, I don't know if KISTI plays or some other organization plays, but I see an added value for you to see that, and only you can see that as district leaders. And once again, I see that, you know, across the states in a different form. The digital driver's license for adults, I'm a big believer in that. We have a high percentage of students that do that. But having something similar for the adults, an easier K-3 login was a common thing across the state. And I also saw what we don't do with McAfee. There's plus and minuses of people's view of McAfee. Overall plus, but definitely some minuses that are in there. Let's see if there's anything else that was consistent. Mike, the planning tool, I'll let you hit upon that a little bit about some words, you know, some quick words you want to say about the district planning tool.
Yeah, all I really need to mention is that we will, you don't have to put me on camera, don't worry about that. That will be released out to the school districts this week. So the KEs will be distributing the new planning tool. I think people are going to really find it to be very friendly to them as far as the use of that. It's got an alignment with the master plan and with the future ready framework. And it's got a pretty good method by which we can submit those and be able to do review of those, provide feedback and so forth. So again, the KEs are going to cover that, I know, and have already spoke to their districts a lot with that about the new planning tool. That'll be out and available through the KEs to the districts before the end of the week is the intention.
So I'm going to compare what you all just said to what I had written down. A lot of these crosswalk, but some of the things that I thought were pretty big successes, and I didn't see those in high numbers in school districts, or at least the ones the roles that responded to this survey. And so I wanted to mention those because I think those will continue to be important going forward. We had great success this year in all the education technology related studies. With OEA study, the Education Superhighway study, correcting the data that was associated with that was misleading about Kentucky. The two reports that we worked with the Auditor of Public Accounts, with Security Bob, you did it, and with the Kentucky Wired special investigation, those took a lot of our time. And I think they displayed the information that needed to be displayed about it. The other positive thing that I think we do extremely well compared to other states is our financial management. We have some people behind the scenes that do that, but we're very frugal. We also are pretty good about diversifying the funds. And so a big part that I do in KD is working across different program areas that normally don't traditionally pay for technology and work it so their funds go toward technology. It is one of the big ways we've been able to grow and sustain through all these years, despite the budgets actually going like this for the past 10 years and 15 years. We've been able to continue to grow, and I think we've done that well, and we've been really good stewards of taxpayer funds. In 25 plus years, and knock on wood, there has not been a scandalous misuse, abuse of the large-scale technology funds of any funding source that we manage, and I take great pride in that. Not that we're 100% perfect without exception, but overall, I would put us up with any other state in the nation. Computer science. That's a big thing that happened. Big strides were made last school year, and your role may not be able to be keeping up with that, but your roles are. We definitely will see an increase on the making the available computer science skills and teachers and interest in that, and opportunities from just not high schoolers, but down to middle schoolers and elementary schools. And you're going to see that this year. You're seeing a lot of what we're doing with the IT Academy. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. I met with the senator sponsor of that right before Christmas, and his approval to expand what we can do with the IT Academy and the certifications that we're going to be offering going forward, I think is important. The congressional, well, Marty, go ahead, and I'll let you hit upon that before I hit on the next one with the computer science. You've had a little bit to do with that.
That's great. I was just at bat waiting to
Go ahead.
throw me a pitch. So great update on computer science. We're looking at February 1st for the final legislative approval for our standards. And then just a quick nudge that we have some really great planning that's starting to kick off all the way through teacher prep and working with higher ed. And this is a long tail game. This is not a short turnaround, but we're really excited about that.
Yep. Thanks. The congressional hearing that we had in Washington in May put us on the radar screen nationally and gave us a lot of positive articles about what we're doing and being a national leader in education technology in the nation. So that didn't hit up on yours, but that was an important one for the PR of the program and for funding and sustainment of the program. I think it's an important way to look at it. Things not well want to improve on, we didn't get to. Data visualization, I didn't want to do that. I told Andy and Megan I want to catch history done, video done. That's an important part to tell part of this message to folks and have a pretty good story that tells that. Really interesting to get the home access numbers more accurate. Going forward, that's going to be very important to a lot of different folks as we expand educational opportunities to the home. I saw some of you with the Katie website to get better, and I agree with that. And our YouTube stream shutdown happened, but we've overcome that pretty well as long as I don't sing songs, I guess, and get us shut down. A thing on the radar screen that none of you mentioned that you know about that you'll see a special webcast that's doing is this Kentucky telehealth. We do have concerns of a lot of folks in this profession showing up on your doorstep, maybe kind of like a pharmaceutical rep, and said, I have X, Y, and Z, without considering the impacts it takes on bandwidth. Is it massive overkill for what it's wanting to do to the network? And then can all your school folks interact with that, your nurses, if there's 30 different products? How's that going to work? And how's that going to work together? So we have been in meetings at the state level, so this is a heads up, words of warning. This is brewing, and you could have people showing up on the doorsteps of your schools and your superintendents, and you're not aware of it. But it's getting ready to happen. So that's definitely an FYI. The other thing that I saw that I think applies to you all from our OET staff feedback is we went to a cloud-based phone system for Kentucky School of Deaf and Blind and KDE. And that's been a grand slam success for us. And so I know some of you talked about cloud-based computing. I do think that is definitely going to be something that we go forth with. Area Technology Centers is on our radar screen, so some of you work very closely with them. It's the only part of KETS in all these years we do not have a technology inventory of. And so Mike knows the initiative this year is to collect the inventory of our area technology centers that we have across the state. And this one was a good one. I think, Marty Park, this was yours. And this is in concept phase, to create an API team to help districts connect their unique data systems to state systems. I think that is a great added value of our organization could add to school districts going forward that they use. Dee Dee, we talked a little about school report card, but mainly the pure technical part of it. But I want you to give them an update on how we're defining it and where we're at with our school report card.
Okay, our school report card is out. What you all have traditionally thought of school report card, which Bright Bites is redoing for us this year, is just really one component of our overall school report card suite. The school report card suite that we think of includes what parents want most, which is access to their students' information. That's what we have already today. We've got that through parent and student portal. We've got that information. That will be focused as part of our school report card suite. Also, our data sets and open house site, and hopefully you've seen the new Kentucky Stats version of the proficiency dashboard that was released over the holidays. So that information had already been previously published, so there's only a new way of looking at data, but that data is out there. So it's different ways of looking at data. So we're trying to promote all aspects of our data availability. You know, part of our Kentucky strategic plan is about making resources more readily available, being more transparent with our data. We want data to be available for informed discussion towards solutions and things that you need. So we're trying to put all that together. The only piece that's remaining to be released is the Bright Bites school report card. That piece is scheduled to go public on Friday. We've got an announcement that will go out Friday about noontime, about 11:30, I think, is the webcast for that. Right now, it'll be the same site that you're looking at today. It's going to be just the password's going to be taken off of it at that point in time. So this is a critical week just to make sure the things that maybe you fixed last week did get updated to make sure that data is good. But I know a lot of you don't look at the school report card. It's not something all the CIOs are out there are doing. There might be other people that are doing, but it's a big exercise, and it's really more than just one or two people at any district, even a small district, to take a look at it and make sure the data is good.
So I'll give you a couple of things we're going to measure with it, and this is something we presented to our state board. They'll be, I guess, in February, be presented to the state board with our strategic plan. And in our office, even though we work with all the offices in KD, is the overall lead of school report cards. So that's why you hear us talk about it so much. And this is one that touches every office, much like Infinite Campus does. So one of our measures, we talked about this a little bit earlier, of it is other states, they're defining their school report card as the parent portal, which we've already had in place for how many years?
5 at least.
5. So they're building it. I mean, you have states that are building it. Now, keep in mind, when you're a state like some around us that has 30 different school information systems, you can't go to one vendor and say, I want a portal. And so we did see that as a plus side, I didn't mention earlier, of our product standardization to one. And so you can't just, so they're having to build. So that's why we've already got a grand slam in our parent portal. Now, one of the ways we're going to measure our success is the percentage of parents and students that are using Infinite Campus. Now, IC can provide that. What they can't provide is, as a parent, is I use my parent access, but there's a good number of parents that go through their child. And so that's a different dynamic to collect because you can't tell which one they're going through. You think your numbers are pretty high here, is that right? We talked about? If you had to estimate, how high you think your estimate is of your parents going on there?
Well, I texted her a while ago when we was talking about it, and she was thinking more like 30%. The elementary teachers, elementary parents don't have much need for it, but high school and middle school, she's thinking it's under 30%. So
30%?
I was thinking it's better than that because I've seen a conversation.
I would say it's higher. She's talking 30%. She's including that elementary group, but I would say our middle school, high school groups who use IC as their main grading component, that parents are checking that. I would say it's got to be 60, 70%.
I would say from a parent, that I mean, I can just say with my kids, especially as they get older, what assignments do you have or not in? So it's a way to stay engaged. So the school report card, I think one of the main things and the primary thing that's put in place is for students and parents. And that's the way we're doing. We're not doing it for researchers in the media, which I'm sure will be upset about that. That's a much lower priority, and I've stated that multiple ways. They have their needs, and we're provided. But this is a tool that allows a parent to stay engaged. And so that's why we're trying to get those numbers up higher, because how many parents don't know that exists? I would feel as a dad, I tell you what I did with my son. Every time I saw a 0 for an assignment, it popped up because it sends out notifications. I took a picture of it on my phone and sent it to him and said, explain. He knew. Now, the children like it too. They like the immediate feedback as well. So we would have to understand why X number of parents don't, because that could be a little bit learning of why aren't they engaged more with their child. It does go back to a school safety issue, I believe, is the more engaged with your child, the more you're able to maybe predict they're at a bad place and getting ready to do something. We talk about all these technology solutions to try to predict a student may or may not do something. I tell people that's we can help predict that they may drop out and not 100% perfection, but to commit a violent act against themselves or others, there's not what a lot of technology ways you can do, but the best way at the school level, but a parent or guardian is the best feel for that. And I would say the more engaged you are with your child involved, or somebody is in their life, the less likely they are to go off in a certain direction. Not 100%, but less likely.
And it's actually in the new early warning system that Infinite Campus did, that is one of the indicators, whether they're actively engaged in that. And if they're not, Infinite Campus has 10 years of our data. They can prove that it is an impact to the fact of whether they'll be successful or not.
The metrics also will be gathering about the school report card. We're going to be taking a look at the high levels that Bright Bite. What do they click on the most? What they click on the least? So that'll help us make adjustments and that's why I say for your parents, I'll be interested in the things that were picked on the main landing page, not level down, level down, level down, that maybe probably more the researchers and newspaper folks would be interested in, but the main level, much like when you look at your IC app on your phone, that's the main thing that most parents are interested in. You know, they can go down deep. Did we pick the right things? And so we'll be able to tell by their behavior whether they picked the right things. We would also like to annually gather a report from students and parents in regards to the value of the portal to them, the value of what's up on the school report card to them. Do we have the right elements? So we're talking about what is the best way to get that feedback from them, and they'll help you all too in gathering that. Also gather it from the employees of the district. The stuff that we have listed on the school report card, mainly, is that a fair top things to list? And there should be something else listed, so there's a balance of that. But also, I can tell you when I presented to Congress in May, the part that any group I've talked to that's really liked is about healthy data diet. Just not the state level and federal level. So in talking about the school report card, and Dee Dee knows this, there's a good number of those data elements that are collected that's not asked by K, the agency, it's federal. That's the only reason they're collected. Right. And so part of maybe helping the feds go on a healthy data diet is show metrics of virtually no human going to these things on our school report card and saying you all need to skim it back. Because no one's seeing added value at the state level, the local level, the parent level. You all need to go on a healthy data diet. So I can tell you that the folks in Congress have presented that to like that. When I present to state legislators, it's the right thing to do. And I tell folks at KDHC level the same thing. The stuff that we collect, if it's not adding value and it really, we can't defend it, it needs to be done every year. Take a look at what can be pulled back. And so that's one of the main reasons, too, we're taking a look at that, is are we on the right target, but also maybe helping our federal folks, pull back what they're requiring us to do. So things you're seeing on that school report card, it's not like someone at KD saying it's what a good number of them, as you know.
Majority of them are federal requirements.
Majority of them are federal.
Very few are state requirements comparatively.
So I do hope some human within the state is looking at that, looking at going forward. Anything that you saw from Go Soapbox that we really need to mention? I know we're closing up here. Appreciate everyone's, once again, feedback that we had across state and us going through it. Hopefully we'll be on the right track going forward. Thank you, Bertie.
Thank you.
For doing it. I think we're getting ready to go play some basketball in your gym.
Absolutely.
I'll take video to report it.
All right. Hope you have a good rest of the month. We'll see you in February. Take care.